Well, Ed Blakely spent 2 years directing the recovery centre in New Orleans following the devastation of Hurricane Katrina. He now works at Sydney University's US Studies Centre, but tonight he's in San Francisco where he's watching this news unfold from West Texas. He joins us now on the phone. Ed, thanks very much for taking our call.
Well, this is very ironic for me. I'm on my way to work on the Sandy disaster, which, as you know, is still very fresh. New York hasn't fully recovered from that. And then we had the Boston incident. My daughter lives in Boston, and I know the city well. And the interesting thing about this is fertilizer, of course, is a kind of ingredient that might have gone into the bomb that was used in Boston. So the ironies here are just huge.
Ed, tapping into your experience in dealing with situations in the aftermath of something like this, where do you begin in a small community with an explosion like this? What are the first things that the emergency services, the authorities, would be trying to do?
Well, the first thing they have to do is get everyone out of the way. And this is the triage that's going on now. People have to be moved away from that town, put into the major hospitals, the burn centers like at Parkland and Dallas and the like. You can't even think of doing anything else at this time except human life and preserving human life. It's going to be a very dangerous situation because this fertilizer may not be fully expended already. There may be still some that hasn't exploded yet. It's like an ordnance. It's like a series of bombs. These bombs can still go off over the next 24 to 72 hours.
So therefore the firefighters could not go close while ever there is that possibility, while ever the factory or what's left of it is still smouldering.
That's right. It'll be some time before they can. And it may be a Chernobyl type situation where they bring in these large helicopters and put concrete and things over the leftovers rather than risk the possibility of an explosion. People who work and grown up on farms and in farming communities know these fertilizer factories are very large. They contain a lot of material. Some of that material might be underground. It might be away from where the first explosions were. There's still residue that could be smoldering, and it could explode at any moment.
Ed, beyond the...
I fear...
I'm sorry, please continue.
I think to their next question, what's going to happen to this town? The economy of this town, the fertilizer factory are the same thing. And I suspect we're talking about the relocation of people. Again, kind of a Chernobyl situation. It's not going to be there anymore. That kind of fertilizer factory will not be rebuilt. A new economy will have to be established. We're talking about a new day, and I hope the traditions of this Czech community can be preserved.
In regard to, before looking that far down the track, in terms of the immediate aftermath of here, the rippling out effect of fumes, toxic fumes, we're already hearing that an area 8 to 10 blocks has been cleared, but if this keeps smouldering, and therefore if the fume situation remains, how much of an extra dimension does this add to what the emergency services have to take into account and how many people they evacuate?
Well, this is very much like Chernobyl. Those fumes can go for a long time over a very large territory. They can do extensive damage to people's lungs, to animal life, and the like. So I think something like a 30 to 40 kilometer area is going to be a no-go area. How they deal with traffic on the highway and things like this, I'm not certain. This is a main road that goes near there, but I suspect major diversions are going to have to take place, for weeks, maybe months.
Ed, I'm not sure how familiar you are with this part of the States in terms of resources and infrastructure, but a semi-rural part of Texas, how much are they set up for the immediate treatment of and fighting back against something of this magnitude? Have they got the resources? Have they got the infrastructure?
Well, I don't know how they stand today. As it happens, I was stationed in the U.S. Air Force very near there, and it is a rural area. It is a flat area. It is somewhat desolate. There are very few things around except petrol stations and a few bars. It's very much like northern Queensland. So there are very scant resources, but they do have the transportation. They're not that far from Dallas. It's possible to resource to the area and get resources from people from the area to the resources, but it is not very well resourced at all.
Ed, you were looking ahead a little for what this might mean for the town, the community, the greater community of West there. In a rural area where I guess options are few as to how a town reinvents itself, the ramifications and ripples of this event, you believe, will go on not for days, weeks or months, but it could be of a more permanent nature for this very community.
Yes. I think you have to think of this, and I'm going to use the example of Chernobyl again, and I know it's not that disastrous. I know we're not talking about radioactive material, but we are talking about massive destruction of the local infrastructure, and it's going to be wiser and more prudent to think about, as Grantham did, to find a new location nearby, rebuild, and move to the future and not dwell in the past. It would not be right-headed, I think. And particularly, these fumes can go on for some time. They can be lurking underground to rebuild there.
Ed Blakely, usually at the University of Sydney at the US Studies Centre, but on the other side of the Pacific at San Francisco in the early hours of the morning there. Thanks so much for taking our call and sharing your knowledge as always.
Well, thank you, and let's hope I don't have to be on very much.
Thanks, Ed.